Blog Talk Radio.
The news in 10 on the 3rd of October 2013. This is Bostonred here, our international program where we do international things. However, today we will start with news out of the U.S. There was a dramatic car chase in the U.S. Capitol in the District of Columbia. A woman driving an Infiniti automobile was able to elude Secret Service at the White House. The agent attempted to, a uniform agent that is, they do have a distinction between the ones in suits, and I suppose this is more working class type, tried to lock the gate literally on her, pushed the gate there. She slammed and knocked him on the hood and then took off through the streets of D.C. There were shots fired, but the only shots fired were actually from various police agencies. The woman was killed. The Capitol was locked down needlessly, it turns out, overreaction to events in D.C. However, though, tonight we'll be talking about Nazis, in particular a Nigerian lady that had a grandfather for Nazi, and then we'll go to Golden Dawn. And lastly, we'll hear from Herman Wallace. And we'll start with Herman Wallace here, actually. Herman Wallace was part of the notorious Angola 3. He was confined in a prison in the state of Louisiana. He was released to a hospital medical facility. He's terminally ill with liver cancer. A U.S. judge, Byron Jackson, did a remarkable and good thing. I'm reading from The Atlantic, which is a polemic, political polemic, middle of the road in the U.S. A decent thing today, something that every judge should aspire to do in the right circumstances. He found a way to bring a little measure of justice to a man whose entire life had been ripe with injustice. He found ways to order the immediate release of Herman Wallace, a terminally ill patient who spent 40 years, if you can imagine this, in solitary confinement to notorious Angola prison in Louisiana. A 6x9 cell for the murder that there was no valid evidence. This particular murder of a prison guard in the 70s, there was no fingerprint evidence, nothing at all. The man was just literally framed because of his political beliefs. He was organizing at the time for the Black Panther Party. I wrote last week, this is the author of the article speaking here, because I felt he had comprised so many failings of the American justice system, an African American whose trial was marked by a racial animus, a defendant whose attorney does the unconscionable work, a lack of physical evidence, adequate investigation. This is what we normally call attorney malpractice in the U.S. And co-defendants as state witnesses with obvious incentive to lie. Punishment that both was cruel and unusual, deliberate indifference on the part of reviewing courts. That happens all the time in the U.S. They talk about the Democratic Republic of Korea, but here there are many, many people, especially across the Southland, and many others that are in so-called solitary confinement, isolation, for literally no good reason at all. In fact, the Boston Marathon bomber, he's asking to be removed from those circumstances. Deliberate indifference, we won't go with Judge Jackson's order, but nonetheless, he did focus upon any constitutional infringements in granting Wallace the relief he sought. Instead, Judge Jackson held the original indictment against Wallace over 40 years ago was constitutionally flawed because women were excluded from the jury. So you add equal protection violations to a heap of ways in which Wallace's rights were denied by our courts for 4 decades. Here's what the judge wrote. The record in this case makes clear that Mr. Wallace's grand jury was improperly chosen in violation of the 14th Amendment guarantee of equal protection of law, and Louisiana courts, when presented with opportunity to correct this error, failed to do so. This is a federal court, incidentally. Our Constitution requires this result even whereas here It means overturning Mr. Wallace's conviction, 40 years later, after it was entered. In the hours after ruling was made public, state lawyers rushed to object to the judge's ruling, arguing that Wallace, who is dying of liver cancer, may have only days to live and did not deserve to be allowed to be free on bail while Louisiana decides whether to retry him or not. The conduct of these officials on this day is nothing if not consistent with Louisiana's treatment of this man. I'll say with people similarly situated there and African American. At long last, Herman Wallace should be allowed to die in peace and in freedom, as far away from the dreaded prison as his breath will take him. Let this, and he is in a medical facility right now for decades while he sat alone in a tiny cell. And justice delayed to Wallace was justice denied to him. Today, while he's still alive, to savor it, the Lord has turned away from injustice. So thus, Mr. Wallace is now in a medical facility. He's dying and could be dead literally at any minute. He will no doubt die as a free man because there's very little they can do at this point in time. And you will hear in the clip here that he's unconscious. He's not able to virtually talk to anyone. Looking at him here, we'll put this photo down here, but he's in, one would say, a very bad way here. He does not know basically what's going on. He's 71 years old. He was taken to the Hunts Correction Center in San Gabriel by ambulance Wednesday and was taken to a New Orleans hospital for treatment of advanced liver cancer. So thus the men who began known as, we remember them, the Angola Free, were moved to solitary confinement, where he spent 4 decades until a federal judge released him there. A documentary was made about him, narrated by the American actor Samuel Jackson, In the Land of the Free, and of course there was another one written also about Mr. Wallace called Herman's House, and you will hear about it there. The other 3 fellow Angola members, Albert Woodfox, Woodcox did not continue to suffer such cruel and unusual confinement even after Mr. Wallace is gone. Woodcox and Wallace had maintained their innocence, and they had a chapter of the Black Panther Party going. Woodfox was ordered released last year. The state appealed his case, and he's still in custody. The 3rd member, Robert King, was released in 2001 after 29 years in solitary confinement. This is what happens in the state of Louisiana. Let's move on to our Nazis now. They're also prevalent here. Here's a Nigerian lady. Her name is Jennifer Teague. She discovered her grandfather was a Nazi, and she lives in northern Germany, in Hamburg. That's an industrial city. And she was found the book in a central library there. Adolf Goff, he was commander of the Pascaris concentration camp near Krakow. Said her mother had told her nothing, but I didn't grow up with my mother. She gave me up as a very small child. She was adopted. When she was in her 20s, she probably didn't tell me anything at this point because she wanted to protect me, as she said here. That was her mother speaking. Adolf Goff. He was her, my grandmother, and she was her grandfather. It doesn't say The mother kind of got lost in the shuffle here. The Nigerian sort of disappeared also. But she lives with the Nazi grandfather, and you'll see a picture of her down here, T's grandfather, and her mother, Herwick, Martha Herwick. Don't know what year this was taken in, but shows them there. So that is a story there. One of an interesting story, at least, I guess you'd say. Hundreds of feared dead from an Italian boat capsized. 133 African immigrants died. Many are missing after a boat capsized, carrying them to Europe off of the southern Italian island. A lot of things, Lampedusa. Most of them were returns in Somalis, evidently here. The boat was believed to be carrying up to 500 people. In other words, it was overloaded. And 200 of them have been not accounted for there. So this continues to happen off the coast of Italy there. Many trying to get to Italy to have a better life, quite literally. Plane crashed in Lagos, in Nigeria. Plane carrying 20 people crashed shortly after taking off from the airport there. A rescue operation is ongoing. The Associate Airlines plane was bound for Ankara, which is 120 miles, 225 kilometers northeast of Lagos. Said the plane crashed into open land there. Not sure what happened. Sounds like mechanical difficulties. It's pretty much a big crash there. So we don't know. It's a major hub for West Africa. 2.3 million passengers passed through it in 2009. So quite a few people there, because in West Africa, a limited number of people actually fly, so therefore a little bit different situation going on. There's still DNA testing in the mall in Kenya, trying to find relatives of people, obviously, that were killed there. The El-Shabaab is linked to them. That's a Somali group that has been blamed for various things. Kenyan troops, about 4,000, served in Somalia, went to Somalia in 2011. And the El-Shabaab, according to these people, have 7,000 to 9,000 fighters, and maybe more. Some were alleged to be Americans. There are a lot of Somalis across the U.S. These are young people that obviously recruiting into these right-wing groups. One thing to remember about Somalia, at one time Somalia was actually a socialist country. It was overthrown by a number of people. The West has their fingerprints all over it when they killed the factional leader Mohammed Aidid. So in other words, this sort of continues there, and a lot of machinations are going on there with the Western intelligence services interfering in the internal affairs of Somalia. And the same thing with Eritrea and Ethiopia. Some progress has been made in Colombia talks. There were round of peace talks in Cuba. Colombia's rebels, the FARC, have been working in negotiations. Remember, at one time, the late President Hugo Chavez was also holding talks. That is the main group. Now, there are other groups there resumed there. The chief FARC negotiator, Ivan Marquez, said the agreement reached so far amounts to a 25-page document. We'll have more on this as they go on. Demobilization of the forces. The Colombian government has a 6-point plan: land reform, political participation, disarmament, illicit drug drugs, rights of victims, and the peace deal. So it happened in Havana. This is a positive situation. We'll go on to the other fascist group, the FARC. We need to deal with them very, very quickly here. Nonetheless, Golden Dawn, I guess right. Anyway, in Greece, they've cracked down on them, and you'll hear a little bit, hopefully, here. They have arrested the leaders of the Golden Dawn, various ones. One of the Golden Dawn fascist types, MPs, shouted Jews, journalists, and traitors, shouted a woman at the media, one of the Golden Dawn type people. So the various pictures here, supporters outside of a courthouse there. More of these Golden Dawn type characters. They're freeing the supporters out there, and some semi-burly types are keeping the supporters back. And you'll hear a little audio here on them. This was on the 1st. Don't know if we'll see if any. Well, actually, this is the Thursday the 3rd. So we are up to date here. I was looking at it's actually Friday in Greece. We'll get ahead of ourselves here on the 4th. So we're just looking at the blog here. It was updated on Tuesday, so this blog is a little behind. Here, and we'll hit a little bit of this audio as we come in here with the Golden Dawn. So this does it for us. Political persecution in the U.S. Sum this up. A shooting spree in Washington by the Washington and Secret Service at some woman in an automobile. We have no idea. She was from Stamford, Connecticut, a dental hygienist. There is we got the word. Doesn't really matter who she was. She's dead. 1-year-old child was also in the car. The child was taken in. I think her name was Mariah Carey, of all things. Was taken into protective custody, and we know nothing else about that. So here, various of these Golden Dawn types have been hauled in to court. Nicholas, let's see, Machos, and Stabrakius is another one there. She took the pictures, Natalie Stabrakius. And Yamas Lokos, and several others here. Won't waste our time with those, but nonetheless, this will do us for us. Beyond the World, our News in 10 on the 3rd of October, 2013. And this cast will start in the States here at 11:30 Eastern Time. Good day.
Because of their political activism as members of one of the first prison chapters of the Black Panther Party. Herman Wallace is now 71 years old, in the late stages of liver cancer. Robert King Wilkerson was released in 2001 after 29 years in solitary confinement. The third of the Angola Three, Albert Woodfox, remains in prison and says he's been subjected to strip searches and anal cavity searches as often as 6 times a day. Well, as Herman Wallace faces the end of his life, we're joined now by 2 people. But first, I want to turn to a clip from a new film about Herman's collaboration with one of our guests. 12 years ago, artist Jackie Summel began writing to Herman Wallace, and one day she asked him, what kind of house does a man who's lived in a 6-foot by 9-foot box for over 30 years dream of? Wallace wrote back with a description, and soon afterward Jackie made a commitment to build a house so Herman could either live in it upon his release or so it could serve as a symbol of survival and hope. The two have often spoken by phone in between their visits, though Herman is now too weak to speak anymore. The calls are part of the story documented in a new film called Herman's House that just premiered on PBS, on POV. In this clip, it was Herman who comforts Jackie after the Louisiana Court of Appeals just turned down his latest appeal.
Jackie?
Yeah.
What's the matter?
Nothing.
I'll see you tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Jackie.
What?
Look, this is a struggle, kiddo, all right? You hear me?
I hear you.
This is a struggle, and it's worth it. Just proud of that. You have to roll with that, and it should make us stronger, right?
Yeah. Well,
so, please, come on. Last thing you want to see is down. You are too much of a strong, happy person for that. And I think as long as you know that I'm okay, I think that's all that should matter, right?
that's correct.
Right, and I'm okay.
That was Herman Wallace speaking with our guest today, Jackie Summel. She's the New Orleans-based artist behind Herman's House, a collaboration with Herman Wallace and the subject of this new documentary by the same name that premiered on PBS POV this summer. We're also joined here in New Orleans by Malik Rahim, one of the founders of the Louisiana chapter of the Black Panther Party. He introduced the Angola 3 members to the party in prison. He's also co-founder of the Common Ground Collective, which helped bring thousands of people from all over the world to help rebuild New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. In 2008, Malik ran for Congress as a Green Party candidate. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! We did submit a request to interview Herman Wallace after he was removed into the prison hospital, but we were told James LeBlanc, Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections, had, quote, denied similar requests in the past few weeks, and he did not want to make an exception in this case. Jackie Summel, Malik Rahim, welcome to Democracy Now! Jackie, you just came back from seeing Herman yesterday. What is his condition?
Thank you so much, Amy. It's an honor to be here. I had an opportunity to visit with Herman yesterday, and it's really obvious, beyond a reasonable doubt, that we are days, if not hours, from watching the state of Louisiana kill another innocent man behind bars.
Was he able to speak?
He's still able to speak a few words. Yesterday he asked me to put his cap on. The inmates had just bathed him, and he was without his cap. He was cold. His words are few and far between. He sleeps most of the time. His belly is distended. He's incredibly uncomfortable. And I think these will be his last few breaths before he joins the ancestors.
Compassionate release, is it a possibility?
I'm not sure in the state of Louisiana if compassion is part of the vocabulary of those who are in power. I always felt that compassionate release, or asking for compassionate release, was important in terms of like a multi-pronged effort to have Herman released. But there's been 42 years of the state continuing to deny Herman's due process.
I mean, 42 years in solitary confinement.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's incredible. He's the longest known serving in solitary confinement in the United States. And one of the things I think is important to illustrate, or that Herman's fight has been, is to illustrate the fact that the U.S. still employs the use of solitary confinement. There's over 80,000 inmates at any given time, and as you said, the highest incarcerator in the world, that are in solitary confinement, a 6-foot by 9-foot cell, a minimum of 23 hours a day. And it's an indefinite period that most people are in solitary confinement.
I wanted to play a clip of Teenie Verrett, the widow of the murdered prison guard. She was just 17 when her husband, Brent Miller, was stabbed to death in 1972. This is the murder that Herman Wallace was convicted of. This is Teenie Verrett from the documentary In the Land of the Free.
I've been living this for 36 years. There's not a year that goes by that I don't have to relive this. And it just keeps going and going. And then these men, I mean, if they did not do this, and I believe that they didn't, they have been living a nightmare for 36 years.
That was Teenie Verrett saying, if they did not do this, and she doesn't believe that Albert Woodfox and Herman Wallace did this, then they should not be serving these sentences.
There's tens of thousands of people who believe that they did not do this. I have absolutely no doubt that Herman Wallace, Albert Wood Fox, and obviously Robert King are innocent.
And Robert King is out.
Yeah, Robert King was released in 2001 under investigation for the same crime and had just served 29 years of solitary confinement for a crime he didn't commit.
Malik Rahim, you are well known in this area. Yes, you ran for Congress. You helped save New Orleans after the Hurricane Katrina. You knew these men in prison. They say they were framed for this murder because of their political organizing. You were involved with that political organizing.
Yes, first I want to say that compassion and justice do not exist in Louisiana. Their confinement is based upon what the state called Black Pantherism. That the Black Panther Party was just an organization of blacks who hated whites and was bent on killing them. And that's what they have based their conviction on. They stay in solitary have been basically because of that Black Pantherism. It has been used throughout their 41 years. Burr Kane have repeatedly said that even if they was found innocent, he would still keep them in solitary because of Black Pantherism.
I want to go to a clip of Herman Wallace in his own words describing the impact of solitary confinement on his body. This is from the film that just premiered this summer on POV called Herman's House.
Being in a cage for such an extended period of time, it has its downfall. I mean, you may not feel it, you may not know it, you may think that you're okay, and you just perfunctorily move about, However, when it was removed from out of that type of situation and placed in an open environment where, you're even breathing that oxygen and it's getting into your lungs and you're feeling something, growing within you, and you begin to develop a different mode within your body. I even watch my body. I looked in the mirror and I've seen muscles and begin to pop out there. I begin to run even faster and I'm saying, "Whoa, what the hell is going on here?" Much was preserved. But then I got locked up again after 8 months. And being locked up like that, the whole body just got confused.
That was Herman Wallace describing solitary confinement. Jackie, you've talked to him a great deal about this.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I want to be clear about, Amy, is that the state of Louisiana has never relied on lethal injection to kill its incarcerated. Right? There's a documented history of neglect, abuse, cruel and unusual punishment, and what I would call lethal injustice, which is the denial and delaying of due process, or our so-called constitutional guarantees. And within that framework, you have men who are spending 40 years in solitary confinement.
Jackie, you did something unbelievable with Herman Wallace. You wrote to him and said you wanted to build a house that he would design.
Yeah, it's unusual.
What was the question you put to him?
I was at Stanford University, full ride with stipend to study art, when I met Robert King. And it was really hard for me to...
One of the Angola Three, the one who was released.
It was just about 2 months after he was released. And it was really hard for me to contextualize my relative privilege to the situation that Herman and Albert were still enduring. And I knew that I had to do something, and, my greatest tool is my imagination. So I asked Herman what kind of house he dreams of after spending then 30 years in solitary confinement in a 6-foot by 9-foot box. And I did that with the hope that this would be the opportunity for him to just use his imagination to get out of that box.
I want to play a clip of Herman from Herman's house, where Herman Wallace describes what sort of details he'd like to see as part of his house.
Jackie, in your letter, you asked me what sort of house does a man who live in a 6-foot by 9-foot cell dream of. In the front of the house, I had 3 squares of gardens. The gardens are the easiest for me to imagine, and I can see they would be certain to be full of gardenias, formations, and tours. This is of the utmost importance. I would like for guests to be able to smile and walk through flowers all year long.
This is not just a figment of Herman Wallace's imagination, Jackie. You are building this house. You're here buying property for this house as Herman Wallace lays dying in a prison hospital.
Yeah, I made a commitment to Herman over 10 years ago that I would build his dream house with the intention, as you said at the beginning of this segment, that this house is a testament to his imagination, to the triumph of the imagination, and to Herman's legacy, which will outlive his flesh and bones. You know, Herman's legacy, his commitment to the people, and the story of his injustice. And it's important to build this house in the incarceration capital of the world.
I want to go to the end of Herman's House, the documentary, where Herman Wallace describes a dream. Listen carefully.
I've had a dream where I got to the front gate and there's a whole lot of people out there. And you ain't gonna believe this, but I was dancing my way out. I was doing the jitterbug. I was doing all kind of crazy, stupid ass, you know. And people were just laughing and clapping, you know, until I walked out that gate. And I remember that dream, and I turned around, you know, and I looked, and there all the brothers were in the window waving and throwing a fist sign, you know. It's rough, man. It really is. It's so real, you know. I can feel it even now, you know, talking about that.
Herman Wallace describing his dream of freedom. Malik Rahim, your thoughts as we end today. As well, we don't know how many minutes or days Herman Wallace has left.
I believe that this is one of the saddest occasions in my life. It wouldn't have been a common ground if it wouldn't have been the Angola 3. And if it wouldn't have been a common ground, then the over 200,000 people that we serve in direct services, what would have happened to them? You cannot say that that justice prevail when you have individuals that under these harsh conditions, I mean going through the brutal summers, locked in those cells, and the coldest winters, locked in those cells, and still have enough compassion to help save this city that have literally forgotten him. You know, I mean, a common ground never would have been sent out the way it was. It was started by by Angola 3 supporter, Scott Crow. You know, it never would have happened without the Angola 3. And this is the reward that he get for saving this city and this area, is to die in a prison cell. You know, I mean, it's something that, you know, it leave a bitter taste in my mouth.
Malik and Jackie, I want to thank you for being with us. Malik Rahim, one of the founders of the Louisiana chapter of the Black Panther Party's knew Herman Wallace in jail and ended up running for Congress on the Green Party ticket. Jackie Summel is building the house that Herman has dreamed of. Herman's House describes their collaboration on PBS POV. That does it for our